Welcome to Have You Heard with Heather Darling. I'm Heather Darling and today's guest is Matt Tal. Matt has been in the real estate industry for 17 years and is the owner of HSR Investments. Matt is well known in the industry and a frequent speaker throughout New Jersey on the subject of real estate, business startups, and entrepreneurialism. Matt has also taken his own advice as a broker in order to amass a successful profile as an investor. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Heather. Great to be with you.
Great to have you back on the show. I appreciate it. Last time you were here was February, and we were talking about what your predictions were for the market in 2022. And now we're going into the fall, which is traditionally the end of that 2022
Correct.
Summer hot season, as they say. So the brakes were definitely on the market this year compared to 21. Why?
Correct. We're probably witnessing the most fast halting of real estate energy that in historical, circumstances that I can remember in my career. Certainly probably goes back much further than that. We were looking at probably the hottest sellers market ever in residential housing back in February. And since that has come to a screeching halt due to moves that the federal government has made to raise interest rates very rapidly and just a basic cooling sentiment.
Where does the cooling sentiment come from?
Well, when rates go up, it handicaps certain people in their buying power. Obviously, they can afford less when their financing costs go up. But there's also a flip side to that. Savers and people that have been unable to get yield onto their money in fixed income now can actually earn more. So it's a catch-22 that the federal government is trying to address by combating inflationary situations out there by raising rates, giving people better buying power. However, when you're looking to put money to work in the way of financing amounts and things like that and putting leverage onto property, it works the other way. It works against your cost basis by raising your debt service. So it's a true double-edged sword for the people.
So winter's not known as a busy time for real estate and residential real estate closings. And now we've got these fuel prices changing, we've got food prices going up. Will we see people listing homes as we move into the spring to get out of the state, to go to greener pastures? And if so, are we going to see more listings coming on in the winter months, or do you think they're going to hold?
I think you're going to see a lot less activity. I think through the cooling process, you're going to see less homes for sale and less homes being bought. The general passageway on both sides will cool off for sure. I think you're always going to have people that have to sell, okay, whether that's a product of family formation, whether that's a product of divorce maybe, or some other circumstance that necessitates you buying a home. Those buyers will always be in the market. But the people that may be toying with the idea of upsizing or downsizing may have to rethink their situation based on the landscape changes.
So there was a mass exodus in Jersey, 2021, and the homes that were vacated were filled with people from New York City and closer to that area. Do you think we're going to see more of that in the years ahead now that the COVID lockdowns have kind of come to an end and there's an interest now in people in these businesses bringing people back into the offices?
Correct. So
will there be a reversal? Will people be going out of the suburbs and back to the cities, out of the country and back to the cities?
I think so. As the work from home movement subsides a little bit and people get back into their offices and get back going corporately, I think that will necessitate people to rush back into the cities. We saw this after 9/11 when the city was deemed potentially unsafe. After a couple of years, everybody rushed right back into the city once it was deemed that the threat was eliminated. So same thing with COVID. Now, the onset of COVID forced people to flee the city, okay, into the suburbs. It's a lot of what drove our markets in New Jersey up. And I think that the return back to the city will actually exacerbate the cooling process in New Jersey. And in addition to that, we have people leaving the state just due to retirement, tax treatment, and things like that. I think we hold a record nationally for the fastest rate of people moving out of the state. So
We've had some losses then.
we're proud of that, right?
So we have enjoyed ridiculously low interest rates as borrowers. People could get money practically for free. But if people looked at their credit card statements, and you see a lot of people that are very much leveraged in the credit cards, they're still paying in the 20% to credit card companies. So it's been a very interesting situation, and people have been spoiled. So now, as you said, as rates go up, there's a bit of a cooling effect on the market. But when you look back to the 70s and the rates in the 70s, we're still well below them. So do you think that people are going to start adapting to what these new rates are and sort of coming out and starting to purchase again and saying, you know, let me lock in now when I'm only paying this because I might start having to pay what I was paying in 1970?
I think the pace in which the acceleration of rates going up is unprecedented and has had people slow down and hit the brakes a little bit. So I don't see people out there running in saying, I'm going to get in before they go higher. We're talking about, you know, federal rate hikes over the last 10 months that almost every 2 months they ratcheted up by 75 basis points at a time, 50 basis points at a time, and we actually have new hikes planned for this coming late November and December. So the pace in which the rates have gone up is a bit perplexing to most. Most people will caution themselves and pause on that. And to your earlier point, it really is a double-edged sword. It really is something that kind of makes winners and losers. And when you're looking to secure a mortgage, higher rates are obviously working against you. Your debt service is higher. When you're trying to save and grow your money, higher rates are a great thing. They're a great thing. Savers have been punished. Seniors have been punished for the last 15 years because money has been free and interest rates have been so low. Now people will go back into their banks and get CDs again at 4% and 5%, and people will feel much better about the growth of their money and the dividends and interest in which their capital can create. However, if you are looking to buy a home and you're looking to place a mortgage against that home, it is considerably more expensive. And the banks like a nice spread between the money that they lend out and the money that they're taking in the deposits. They usually want about 300 basis points between those two numbers. So if they're lending at 7, it won't be long until you can see those CDs around 4%, and they'll, you know, obviously have that gap. They call that net interest margin, and that's kind of the bread and honey of banking. Okay, and as these rates go up, you know, once again, savers will smile ear to ear. People looking to place mortgages on real estate will cringe.
And do you think that this will trigger a bottom in pricing?
The only reason why price action is staying high and not coming down is because of the low inventories. It's an unprecedented time in the way of supply in the country. So although it's become majorly tough to buy a home from an affordability perspective, it's also tough because there aren't a lot of selection in the market. You still have a lot of people competing for a very limited inventory. And due to that fact, prices won't drop because there aren't very many homes available. Now, it would be my opinion that as soon as we see the inventories grow and as soon as we see more options, more homes for people to compete for, it's at that point that sellers will have to lower the price to be competitive.
So this show is taping shortly before an election. So by the time it airs, there will have been one. What is your prediction for the markets in the spring if Republicans win the House and the Senate in November?
Real estate markets, I'm not sure you're going to see a drastic move up or down, given the results of an election. You certainly will see that in the stock market. The stock market tends to respond more to, political conditions. The rates are still going to be higher, and the Fed still has their plan for ratcheting that up and tightening. And I don't think the outcome of an election is going to change what the Fed is going to do. They're going to go ahead and make their moves based on inflation, based on the economy, and things of that nature. They're strongly correlating their moves now to CPI increases and things like that. So I don't think the real estate market will move too much based on the outcome of an election.
Interesting. So I won't ask the same question as to Democrats because you're going to give me the same answer. So in the next year, what parts of New Jersey, north, south, central, do you think will see the biggest shift in home sales going up, down, and what do you think those shifts will be?
Well, usually we see weakness from west to east. So what I mean by that is the western part of the states, or the western part of the state rather, the part that is furthest from New York City, it usually shows the first telling signs of where the market's headed, because as they lose strength, people will lose strength slowly going east. But the eastern part of the state, closer to New York City, holds their ground longer in values. And that's because it's in more demand. The population in those areas is a lot more. For example, there's a lot bigger density in Hudson County and Essex County than there would be, say, in Hunterdon County. So because the population is so much heavier there, it's going to contribute to more transactions, more activity, and things of that nature. But I look at values from a west to east perspective because that gives me a very clear indication of what's happening in the market first area showing weakness being the west, last area to show weakness being the east.
Strength as well.
Correct. Yes.
Interesting. So in 2021, we saw smaller properties that were selling within days of hitting the market, and frequently in bidding wars at that. As prices rise on just about everything, like we talked about, do you think we'll see people looking for larger properties again where they can pool their a family can pool their financial resources? So you might see multiple generations going into a single family house again.
Yes, the real estate frenzy at the time when the market was most hot, the beginning of 2022, we saw all asset classes participate in that. So whether a home was high end or low end or middle end or entry level, it didn't matter. Real estate was real estate. It all kind of went like a hot cake. In a high rate environment, now that's going to put a lot of pressure on the higher end market. And the reason is because the loan amounts associated are much higher. So the monthly debt service is that much more accentuated. So I see entry-level property being much more hot than luxury property because of the demand, okay? Family formation, entry-level housing, and there are much more buyers out in the market competing for that price point. So, and they're also more minimally impacted from the rate environment because they're mortgaging less. So with that being said, I think you'll see a lot of weakness in the upper end of the market that will go from west to east, as I mentioned earlier, and I think you'll see the biggest price drops in the higher end market.
What do you think will be then the hottest sellers or rentals going forward? Do you think we're going to see closer to the city, closer to the water gap, away from the city? What do you picture?
That's a little bit up in the air depending on how the 4-day work week unravels and how much the work from home movement transfers back to going to work. I think that that's a big play on the housing market because you can imagine people working out of home offices feel a certain way about their home if that's where they're working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, versus if they're leaving the home all day. So to answer that question, I think we're going to have to see how the economy unfolds, how corporations are going to handle employees at the office and at home, and how this whole 4-day work week, I work from home, I don't work at all, kind of dichotomy plays out. That will control that factor of the real estate market.
Well, it's interesting to me because gas has gone up, right? And that's how you commute to work. You take rail or you pay gas. They're paying more for tickets on rail, bus, things like that.
Right.
But your electricity is also going up. And if you have everyone staying home with the lights on, the heat on, are you not potentially spending more than if you were to go to work that extra day?
I think you are potentially spending a little bit more, but however, if you're home working and you have a higher utility bill, but you're working from home and you're not commuting and you're not filling the gas tank twice a week.
And you have the dry cleaner.
Right, you're not doing the dry cleaner, you're not getting the Starbucks coffee on the way maybe, So there are a couple of expenses that are kind of have gotten chiseled out, and I think that that's what's actually contributed to families' financial strength in the last couple of years. The COVID pandemic allowed people to save by accident because they're incurring less expenses that they normally would in their routine. So, if I'm a working person, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and I get a Starbucks on the way and I eat lunch out because I'm in the corporate cafeteria or there's a lunch meeting of some kind, or maybe I'm grabbing something on the way home, I'm paying for parking, I'm paying for a rail pass, I have all different kinds of factors to that. So I'll be interested to see what the numbers are, but I think the average family's balance sheet could be up a 5-figure number by virtue of not incurring those expenses, and I think it kind of happened by accident. That really has made balance sheets more flush, and people have a lot more equity in their home because the values have gone up. So with people seeing the health of their own family balance sheet, improved by those factors, it gives people energy to enter the market. But by the same token, I think that the rates are a real headwind to people's decision making.
We have to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with more Have You Heard with Heather Darling and our guest, Matt Tal.
Aloha! Joe Silva here with Kukua Technologies. I'm excited to see you on Tuesdays on Morning Coffee for our tech tips.
Let's face it, lawyers get a bad rap. I'm Erin Brucey, host of Legal Breakdown, where we dissect legal topics for the everyday viewer, with a mix of interesting guests to talk about current events and hot legal topics. Let's work together to make the law accessible and relevant to everyone. Catch us every week on RVN Television.
A stroke can be easy to detect. A loved one can't speak, perhaps they can't move. But there's another sign of a stroke that many of us can't see. It's called spatial neglect, and it can occur during or after a stroke, causing distorted visual movements. Fortunately, there's a solution by using optical prism technology during rehabilitation. If you or a loved one have experienced a stroke, ask your doctor about spatial neglect. Spatial neglect. See the whole picture at KesslerFoundation.org.
Welcome back to Have You Heard with Heather Darling and today's guest, Matt Tal. Matt, we saw a significant trend toward more experiential living centers with sort of small living quarters and then large recreation areas within the complex, business centers, gyms, and they were sort of surrounded by little plazas where you could go get your coffee at a Starbucks, and you had a yoga studio and all these little niceties with a shuttle that would take you to the train station. And that was kind of what millennials seemed to be going for, and it was quite a trend. So then 2020, COVID came along, and the brakes really got pumped hard on that. So do you think we'll go back to that? And it's a double-edged question, because now we've got Gen Z will be entering the market in the next couple of years. And Gen Z is the exact opposite, where millennials want to downsize. Gen Z seems to like to have a lot of stuff. So will that swing that pendulum back, and will a developer be making a bad decision to go into one of those properties now?
It's a great question, and it's going to take some time for that to unfold. The lifestyle centers that you're referencing were a product for the millennials because they really were not interested in being homeowners. They didn't want to own a lawnmower, they didn't want to own a weed whacker, they didn't want to maintain a pool, they didn't want to have to own tools, they didn't really want to have to do much around the house as we know it. So the lifestyle centers allowed them to almost be commuting centers. It allowed those millennials to navigate to work, to and from, and kind of just have a home base away from work. And they got really cute with the small studio type apartments with the retail attractions that you talked about, such as a dry cleaners and a Starbucks and all the different things that were actually inside the lifestyle center. But it really functioned as a place for them just to kind of sleep, because 9 to 5 or Monday through Friday, they would leave that center prior to COVID, prior to the work from home movement, and go to a location, a physical location, and come back. So it's almost like they were leaving when it was dark, coming back when it was dark. Now, will developers get back into this product if the market commands it? Of course, if they call for it, it will come. But that's going to be correlated about how the work week unfolds. If they get people back to work, if employers get back in the driver's seat and start to dictate their terms and conditions of when employees are going to come to work, and they say, you know what, we're going to need you here Monday through Friday, and we're going back to normal here, I think the lifestyle centers will come right back, okay? But when employees are given the flexibility and the option to stay home and to be more remote, other factors of life come into play, such as childcare, such as other errands that need to be run, such as how do I coordinate my grocery trips with being home and pick up the kids from school and this and that. So it really kind of gives a lot more movement, okay? And until we see the employers back in control, that's when I think developers would consider building those centers more. However, now building has become quite a different landscape than it used to be too, due to the inflationary climate of materials associated, okay, and also the rates being high doesn't help a developer much who's looking to put construction debt onto a property.
So here's a question for you, and this is sort of like a broader market analysis that I'm going to ask you to do. We have Elon Musk coming in and changing Twitter, right? Maybe cutting a lot of jobs. We don't know.
Right.
With a lot of reasons why he might be cutting a lot of jobs. So we have to weed through all these things. Do you think that maybe he's on the forefront of what we're going to see from a lot of other employers that are going to say, look, you need me more than I need you?
Well, right now the employees are calling the shots. The employees are saying, in order for me to perform for your company, I want X, Y, and Z. And I think that because we are having a little bit of a labor crisis, it puts them in the driver's seat. They can say to a company what they're willing to do and not willing to do. When the bank account is full, when their home has equity, it's easy to be a little, bossy with those demands. Okay, but if we enter a recessionary climate, people start to get concerned about their finances, and all of a sudden the housing market maybe takes a little bit of a pause, and balance sheets for families aren't as healthy looking. Then all of a sudden they might be a little more humbled, and they might, be willing to say to their employer, "Okay, I will do what you want me to do, or I'll flex with you, and I'll take on, this 5-day work week back and do what you need me to do." So I think that companies are really in flux, and time is going to have to unfold to see what the dynamics are. But things are flush, employees are in control over employers. Things go bad, I see the employers getting right back into control.
Okay, so scarcity of land, how does that impact the market? Because we've got a scarcity of land to begin with people having children and people living longer, and now we have people coming across the border by millions, potentially. How does that impact home prices, home sales?
Well, it does and it doesn't. There are certain areas of the country that are very rural in nature, but the populations of the area are also lower. So there isn't so much demand for that land. But for example, in the New York City area, a 100 by 100 foot lot is gold. There's premium for it. Now in the middle of a Midwestern state, probably not as much attention to it, right? So that dynamic is interesting to see how it unfolds. As our population increases, which is what I think you're alluding to, I think it does place a larger premium on land. Our agricultural position in the world economy places a lot of value onto our land. We are seeing a lot of very wealthy investors, some of which are out of the country, domestic and foreign, that are buying up massive tracts of land in the Midwest. Okay, and I think that has a lot more to do with the agricultural output that the United States is capable of, because that's kind of our world trading card, if you will. So I don't think it really has much to do with the housing market, why they're making those acquisitions. I think it has everything to do with an economic control system.
So we hear a lot about North Jersey, South Jersey, Central Jersey. We have different geographies, and we also have different centers, like you said, close to New York, but close to Philly as well. I mean, right here in the studio, we're in Cherry Hill. We're down the street from Philadelphia. You start getting closer and closer, and a 100 by 100 foot piece of land is a valuable property.
Right.
Yet you go into certain parts of South Jersey and you look at cranberry bogs and other things where you're restricted. In North Jersey, as you know, where there's water rights and things like that, very restricted. How do you see the geography of our state and things along those lines playing into the markets in those areas?
Well, it goes back to the golden rule about real estate: location, location, location. Everybody's heard that, and it couldn't be more right on the money. Obviously, waterfront changes values of land based on if it's on the water or not. Whether a home is built on, say, the Hudson River or on a lakefront changes the value if it's in the middle of nowhere. Density has a lot to do with that as well. Okay, the more dense the area is, the more value the land tends to carry with it. So New Jersey has an interesting layout where there's a lot of pockets of different densities. So we have our areas located by New York City, which dictate a certain climate and dictate a certain valuation. We also have areas that are close to Pennsylvania that you can see rolling hills for miles, and no one will buy them anytime soon. We also have restrictions such as the Highlands Act and things like that. We also have farmland preservation, open space programs. So New Jersey's a funny animal compared to the other 49 states in the way that it has probably the most premium density areas that would be consistent with any major city like New York or Philadelphia, but then it also has wide open country areas that people don't know about that would be consistent with the Midwestern agricultural situation as well.
In 2021, we saw that mass exodus from, 2020 was the COVID issue, and then 21 was really when everybody left. 20 people kind of waited it out, let's see what happens. Then they got tired of it. Now we've got these heating oil prices going up. Do you think we're going to see an exodus of people from this state and the Northeast generally into warmer climates after a really hard winter with the heating oil prices being as they are?
I don't see people leaving the state due to inflation. I see people leaving the state due to taxation. But I think inflation is pretty consistent across the whole domestic United States. So I don't think, for example, heating your home is going to be much cheaper in Texas or California than it would be in New Jersey. So I don't think people will flee the state based on operating expenses of their home. But tax treatment certainly changes the whole game, and there are a lot of states that are a little more favorable in their tax treatment for retirees. And when you're no longer working and you're working with just fixed income, it becomes a major factor.
So I got the signal that we have to wrap it up, but let me ask you this. As an investor, what are you doing with this market? Would you be employing capital? Are you holding capital and waiting to employ it? Where would you stand?
Well, we saw the writing on the wall back in February when we first got together on the topic. We sold, our firm in particular sold a lot of our assets, particularly all of our residential assets, in 2021. We smelled this bubble kind of bursting. I hate to use the word bubble, but we smelled the market peaking out. Okay, and we raked that capital back, and we essentially have now become a private equity firm where we are going to assess the market for distressed entry points. But as far as real estate goes, we're going to have to sit it out and wait. I mean, as financing costs have gone through the roof, as rates go up, it's prohibitive of us deploying that capital, and we have to be very convinced that distressed low entry points in order for us to get back into the market. So we'll actually start to shift into other asset classes, like for example the stock market that might be 20 or 30% off of its all-time highs of earlier this year. So even though we're diehard real estate guys and girls, there might be other opportunities in other areas, to find that distressed entry point. So as far as redeploying that capital back into the real estate market, it's hurry up and wait.
So it's a hold right now?
It's a hold, sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Matt, I want to thank you for joining us today. Everyone, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week for more Have You Heard with Heather Darling.
Thank you. Great to be with you.